Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Breakfast Tyne on the Toon Review YouTube channel. My name is Paul. Thank you so much for tuning in this morning. We have news on Osula, and it looks like Newcastle United may consider selling Will Osula in January. Ross Wilson has certainly been a very interesting appointment, that's for certain, but he does have a lot of jobs ahead of him, it seems, and he is already putting down his sword, if you like, crunching down on certain players that might possibly leave in January. It's fascinating, this, because obviously there is a few players at Newcastle United who I think need to move on. In all fairness, I think they do need to move on. Now, Will Osula's been mentioned. We'll look at some of the other names mentioned. And who do you think should also be on the way? Because it certainly looks like Will Osula is still pulling in interest from Germany. So it's a strange one for me because, of the situation with the strikers at the moment. I think we need to be very, very careful with what we do with the strikers, given that we still don't know about Wissa. We still don't know what he's going to do come the African nations, of course. So that's fascinating for me. We have obviously other news as well that, to be honest, it mainly involves Ross Wilson and what he's going to do at the club. He's also spoken about Elliot Anderson because he was obviously at Nottingham Forest when the PSR issues kicked off with Newcastle, and they needed to sell Anderson, and unfortunately he left. So anyway, we'll take a look at all that as well, and any stories that may pop up during the show, because you just never know with Newcastle United. It's always kicking about. The story's always breaking. People are always fascinated for some reason into what is going on at Newcastle United. But we will take a look at that. But then again, if you do enjoy the show this morning, guys, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And of course, please do subscribe if you are new around here and you like what you see. It is completely free of charge. You can become a member as well of the Toon Review. That's the join button just underneath myself. And of course, super chats, as usual, are expected. If you do super chat the channel, you're guaranteed your comment will be read out as a thank you, basically, for sending in a super chat. Right, let's take a look at Will Osula then, because it seems like obviously Eintracht Frankfurt is still kicking around for the signature of Will Osula. Now, look, many of us are asking the question at the moment regarding Osula and thinking, well, hang on a minute, he's getting game time now. He's coming on as substitute for Voltemade, and to be fair, hasn't done badly at all. He's done okay. I'm still of the opinion, however, and listen, I may be way off the mark here, but I just don't believe that Will Osula is the future. I don't believe. I still haven't seen enough from him to tell me that he is going to be a dependable Premier League striker. And I mean that as absolute no disrespect to Will Osula. I just don't think he's the one. Now, whether this means that Ross Wilson is already starting to look at maybe alternative options for Will Osula, I don't know. That will obviously, we'll see in due course. But it seems to me the reports that I'm seeing this morning are very much about Ross Wilson already stamping some sort of authority in the club. And, as director of football, he has obviously got jobs to do with contracts, etc. We spoke about that last night on the show with me and Alex about the job ahead of trying to get these extensions to the elite players. Now, it always seems like Will Osula is, certainly since the summer, PIF decided not to sell him. And they were being very, very careful with that because of what was going on with Wissa. The deal was stopped at the last moment, of course, or he would have gone to Eintracht Frankfurt for, I think it was around £35 million, which is an exceptional amount of money considering the goals that he hasn't actually scored for Newcastle. He's done okay. Don't get me wrong. He's done okay. But like I say, I just don't think Will Osula is what we need moving forward. If we're going to be an elite football side, it's not like Will Osula is a kid, right? He's 24, 25. I think he's got talent. I'm not denying he's got talent, but maybe not the talent that's needed for where Newcastle United need to be. And it just seems like Osula is possibly one of the main players that's going to leave the club in January. Of course, Ross Wilson has to make room for other players coming in. We may not sign anybody in January. January is a very, very difficult window to bring anybody else in. So for me, that's going to be a very difficult job, even for Ross Wilson now. He's got to get these elite players under contracts. I think that's his first major job that he's going to get tasked with. And then he will look at the transfer window. But when he looks at the transfer window, he might find that it's not really possible to do anything in January. It's a difficult window. Prices are all over the place, and it's just a very, very difficult window to bring in talented players that you want moving forward. They don't, get a pre-season. They may not have played a lot before you sign them, etc., etc. So whether Ross Wilson is already looking at another striker, we won't know that until January. Certainly there'll be speculation out there that if Newcastle United are willing to let Will Osula go, then there must be somebody else out there who Newcastle United particularly got an eye on to bring to the football club. Look, we spoke about this last night about Ross Wilson. He hasn't exactly filled anyone with a lot of confidence. Is this the man for the future? He's not the big name director of football that I think a lot of Newcastle United fans were hoping that would come in. However, we have to give this guy an opportunity, and if he feels like along with Eddie Howe that maybe Osula's not going to make the grade, they'll sell him. Now, to be honest, what probably might have been better would be a loan deal for 6 months to Germany, see how he gets on, with an option to buy, and then if it doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out, but. I think if Newcastle are offered £35 million for Will Osula, that is an awful lot of money, folks. It's an awful lot of money. And I really genuinely think Newcastle take that. But look, who would they bring in? I don't know. But what I do know is it seems like Ross Wilson is off to a very, very quick start as director of football, really pushing out there his the importance of the role, for one, and two, what he plans on doing in the very near future. There is other players probably up for debate as to who we get rid of. Mainly academy players. I think the 6 being named that could be on the way. Now, one of them is Ben Parkinson. Now, Ben has played a few times for Newcastle. He's come on as sub and very nearly got a move to Blackpool. But there's still a lot of interest for loan deals for Ben Parkinson. But look, he has come on a few times for Newcastle last season. Not many people have been impressed and looked at Ben and thought, yeah, he's going to make the grade. And I think that's what it's all about. We've spoken in the past about Newcastle United having to be a bit more cutthroat with the players, and acting like an elite club. And the fact is that some of the players there in the academy now are not going to make the grade. I've seen the academy players play. There's been lots of other Newcastle channels specifically watching the academy. There is players there who are not going to make the grade. And in the past, there's been an awful lot of these players just staying at the club. And I genuinely think that now David Hopkinson's come in, and now we've got Wilson as well, and with Eddie Howe, I think there's going to be a little change of guard here and say, right, this is where we need to be a little bit more cutthroat with these players and send them on the way. Obviously not nastily. If they need help finding another club, I'm sure Newcastle United, would be involved in that and give them some advice and give them some help. I don't have a problem with that. And I think I would rather see players who have been on the periphery for a long time now just not going to make the grade. And probably I would agree with Ben Parkinson that he's probably not going to make it. Cathal Heffernan. Now, this is an interesting one for me because Heffernan came in. He has a lot of promise, and it just doesn't seem to work out. From all reports, he's ready to make his first move into senior football, but the problem is getting into the Newcastle side. That where we are now, maybe it's the EFL that he's looking at to move in. Now, Alex Murphy is mentioned as well. Now, this one I don't agree with. I think Alex Murphy should be around the first team. I think he's good enough. When Lewis Hall was injured, we specifically said that we would love to see Alex Murphy come in and maybe do a job. We've seen him in pre-season a couple of times, and he's played against some very, very good players and didn't look out of place at all. So I'm kind of not really too... I don't want him to leave. I think Alex Murphy deserves an opportunity. And so I'm really surprised he's on that list. Charlie MacArthur's on there as well. Of course, he made the move from Kilmarnock 3 years ago and was expected to push his way through to the first team. This guy came with a lot of promise. We brought him in to help the academy grow, and it just hasn't worked. Look, he's worked his way up the ladder into the under-21s, but look, this is where we need to make decisions on players. We can't keep them around for too long. Aidan Harris, goalkeeper. Look, we've got so many goalkeepers. If you're a goalkeeper in the academy, you're kind of looking at it thinking that I'm possibly going to have to move here because the chances of getting into the first team, etc., are very difficult right now. So you wouldn't blame a goalkeeper for wanting to leave. And maybe the fact that, Ross Wilson's come in, Aidan maybe knocking on the door and saying, I need to move. I need to move for my career because I want to play football. And given how many goalkeepers we have at the club, it is going to be extremely difficult. Now, the final name on this list will probably surprise a lot of people, and that's Alfie Harrison. Of course, signed from Manchester City, training with the first team. He came with so much promise, but it just hasn't worked. And he is now at a critical point in his development. Should have probably been around the first team a lot sooner, given the potential that he had. And a loan deal may be on the horizon for Alfie Harrison. I'm a little surprised because he did, like I say, he came with so much promise, Alfie. He was already training with the Manchester City first team, but something just hasn't happened. And Darren Lee says that I expected more from Harrison. So did I. I have to be honest and say that I did expect more from Alfie Harrison, but for some reason, that just hasn't taken fruition. And the times I've seen him around the first team squad, he's come on a couple of times. I haven't really seen enough to say, wow, Apparently Osula's only 22. Well, that's still not really a kid. Normally at 22, 23, you're kind of looking at a player thinking, you're making a decision, aren't you? Yes or no. He is Premiership quality or he isn't. Look, Eddie Howe may think completely different. I think the only thing for me is that he was very, very nearly sold at the end of this window. And already there's talks that, Eintracht Frankfurt and a few others, to be fair, there is a few other Bundesliga sides interested in Will Osula. So that may actually happen. But it says a lot to me that if this move is on the horizon, then either we've got our eyes on somebody else to come in, or they just don't think that Will Osula is going to make the grade. And Eddie Howe has seen enough. So I don't know. Will Osula's he's a funny player, guys. He really is. 1 minute he'll do something that's absolute genius and you think, wow, this guy, he can play. Undoubtedly he can play. But then again, you look at some of the other stuff he does on the pitch and you think, nah, this kid's not making it. He's just not there. So it's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot of people have different kind of, thoughts on different players, and that's just my thought on Osula. If I genuinely thought Will Osula was good enough, I'd say so. He may well be good enough, guys. He may well turn out to be good enough, and part of me hopes he is. I'd like to see Will Osula succeed. By all accounts, he's a great kid. He's great around the dressing room. His banter's fantastic. We've seen that. But for me, I'm just, I'm not convinced yet as a fan. Jay says, can we just rescue Cadero, please? Get him back to the Toon and soon. I haven't really kept an eye on Cadero, actually, since he's been on loan this season. Of course, there's another player who Newcastle United plucked out of the Spanish Football League and sent him on loan. I'm not sure how he's doing. But, Jay, if you know how he's doing, let us know in the comments, mate. David says Osula lacks football intelligence. Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that's something that Eddie Howe can work with Osula on. In my mind, you can You can improve on that, but should he have improved on it already? The length of time he's been at the club, it's a long time that he's been here now, and should have improved. Cadero not getting any game time apparently. Well, that's when you send a player out on loan, that's the thing you look for, isn't it? You want to make sure that player is getting game time and regular game time. That's the whole point of loaning a player out. You want that player that you've got out on loan to get game time. Now, I'm not sure what's in his agreement or anything like that, whether Cadero's initial loan agreement said he would play a certain amount of games, but if he's not getting any game time, get him out of there. Get him back here, get him playing in the academy and get him some football. Because if he's not playing football, then that's a risk, because he's going to come back to Newcastle and got no experience at all. Yorkshire Geordie says, I got a feeling if we get rid of him, we're going to regret it. Need to start putting buyback clauses in. Well, speaking of buyback clauses, actually, I was reading an interesting article this morning about Elliot Anderson, and of course, the work that Ross Wilson did to bring Anderson to Nottingham Forest. Now, it was generally because of PSR. We all know that transfer wouldn't have happened if Newcastle United weren't in desperate need of the funds to cover themselves PSR. The deal just wouldn't have happened. Elliot Anderson would have been a Newcastle player. But one thing's for certain, he wouldn't be where he is now, because he wouldn't have got the game time at Newcastle United. Yes, he would have probably made a few sub-appearances or a couple of starts here and there as Eddie rotates the squad. But he certainly wouldn't have been in the England squad. He wouldn't be getting the regular football that he is now. He's pivotal to Nottingham Forest. And he's now, very pivotal, it seems, to Thomas Tuchel in England. However, the report also states that it may be Ross Wilson's job at some point to bring Elliot back to Newcastle. Now, this is where the frustration lies, that there's apparently no buyback clause in this original agreement for Elliot Anderson when he originally left for Nottingham Forest. Now, obviously, because of the PSR and FFP circumstances, maybe there just wasn't time to negotiate that. The deal had to get done and had to get done quickly, which I assume was the case, because I can't understand why Newcastle United would let him go at such a cheap price as well and not put the buyback clause in. The only thing that stands out to me is that because of the speed that it had to be done, and let's not forget there was the Minter deal as well to Brighton. Those deals had to be done and done very, very quickly because of the situation. And there wasn't much time to negotiate anything to be put into them contracts, which is why I genuinely believe that's why there's no buyback clause. So if we go back to Nottingham Forest and try and get Anderson back, it's going to be a monumental task, and it's certainly not going to be cheap, because Elliot Anderson's value has risen tenfold since he's been in Nottingham Forest. He's now a regular England international, and we've seen in the past that these England internationals, they don't come cheap, especially youngsters like Elliot Anderson who have broken through with such style. This guy is doing it week in, week out in the Premier League now. And we all knew he was a top player when he was at Newcastle. Of course, he went on loan to Bristol Rovers and was absolutely outstanding. His potential has never been in question, but now that potential is now coming to fruition, and we will have to pay the money for Anderson. And you're talking millions of pounds here, because I guarantee that we're not going to get him back for anywhere near 35 million. Nottingham Forest got a bargain. Eddie Howe said that in his press conference, that it was a bargain originally for Elliot Anderson, and unfortunately, that's just where everything lies right now, is the fact that it was so frustrating that we had to sell him. So Ross Wilson may end up being the DOF to bring him to Nottingham Forest. He may well now be the DOF to try and bring him back to Newcastle United, and that's going to be a monumental task. Adnan says, Osula is a top player. It's crazy they want to sell him. It can only mean Dan Burn and Gillespie and Trippier will get big new contracts. Adnan, I don't think he's a top player. I'm sorry, mate. I don't mean to that's your opinion. And of course you're welcome to that, but I disagree. I don't think Osula is a top player. Not yet. Now, is there still time to prove me wrong and a few other fans who agree with me? Absolutely there is. But all I'm saying as a Newcastle fan sitting here now is that I haven't seen enough from Will Osula to say to me that he's going to succeed in the Premier League or he's a top player. I don't think he's a top player yet. I think that's way off at the moment. But you know what? He could end up being a top player, and I hope he does. Ian says you'd think every player would have the relegation release. Well, yeah. I mean, Nottingham Forest are at the moment are in a bit of a spiral. I mean, obviously things would change if Forest went down. I think that would, if Forest got relegated, then obviously that changes everything. But you know, as poor as they are at the moment, I don't think they're going to get relegated. But if they do, then there's our opportunity to go and get them. Jay says somebody must be attending to these youngsters in a better way. They are stars in the making. Why loan some of these out to clubs? They must get to the standard wearing black and white as hoped. It's been a problem for a long time, Jay, the academy. We just don't seem to be getting the results in the academy. You know, you look at the results coming through, whether it be in the the Academy Premier League, etc. And some of the results you kind of think, wow, we've took an absolute pasting there. The under-18s have took a few pastings this season already. And you kind of look at it and think, well, hang on a minute. Some of these players have come in with massive potential. Do you look at the coaching of the academy? You know, is that where we are letting ourselves down and maybe things need to change there with regards to the coaching in the academy? Because if that's the case, then, let's get it done. I don't watch the academy enough to make that assumption that there's something wrong with the coaching. But maybe that's something that Newcastle United as a club do need to look at. They need to look at the issues with the coaching. Why is the academy struggling? It needs to be answered. I think you've raised a good point there. Dan, good morning to you. If Elliot Anderson came back in January, wouldn't that mean he goes right to the bench? Also, Byrne and Gillespie in the same sentence is a disgrace. Yeah. Look, Elliot Anderson, I think he's not coming back in January. Let's be openly honest here. There's no way Elliot Anderson is coming back in January or next summer for that matter if Nottingham Forest stay in the Premier League. There's just no way he is. You know, now what might happen in the future is that his contract's coming to an end at Nottingham Forest. He wants to come back home. There may be an opportunity for Newcastle there when his contract's coming down. We'll get him a bit cheaper than normal. Or like I just said, if relegation is into the equation, then they might look at that. But at the moment, he's certainly not come back in January or next summer at the minute. That's the rumour I heard down here about Anderson. I'm not sure what that means. Kieran says if Newcastle want to be on the level of the best teams, then the whole under-18s need to improve themselves or just get rid. Yes, I agree with that. Ian says, can we not get Gillespie as coaching badges cheaper than paying him as a player? He shouldn't even be here. Let's be honest. I've got nothing against Mark Gillespie, but come on, the guy's stealing a living. We know that. You know, he's getting 10 grand a week for just training. I mean, I would do that. You know, if they want to pay me 10 grand a week, I'll go and, despite my ailments, I'd go and perform on a training pitch for 4 or 5 days a week. For 10 grand? You're bloody right, I would. It would be worth all the, limping around and crippling soreness every morning for 10 grand a week. Yeah, bugger, I'd do it. No problem at all. Hasbo says, I like Osula, but he needs to get the game time to become a good player. Every player needs that game time to be a good player. Look, he's not going to get it, though. And certainly when Wissa's fit, he's just definitely not going to get it. So I'm in the opinion that, the sale of Osula is going to happen. I have to be honest. I think it will. I think if Wissa comes back and doesn't... This all depends on Wissa again, though, doesn't it, with his African nations? If Wissa doesn't go to the African nations, then I see the move happening. If he does go, then there's no way we get rid of Osula, because that would be absolutely criminal. It would be suicide. Just going with Voltemada, and then obviously if Voltemada, any injuries to him, and then we're left with Anthony Gordon back up front again. Which has been proved numerous times does not work. So it all depends on Wissa. Niall says Anderson would be the player he is now if he stayed. That's the truth. He wouldn't have got the game time. 100%. Poker says, I'd be much happier for Osula to get a loan. Still looks like a lot of potential to me. Yes, and that's generally what I mean. How long do we go with potential? How long do we give a player with potential? And we keep saying that. Oh, he's got potential. He's got potential. But how long? How long does that excuse keep ringing on, saying, oh, yeah, he does some crazy things, but he's got potential? If he's 22, 23, surely we need to see more of that potential. And I don't quite think we have. He scored a couple of great goals, don't get me wrong. But his all-round game, nah, not for me. Fubar says Sean Neve might get moved up to the first team. Well, listen, Fubar, he's been mentioned a lot in the reports this morning when they're talking about Ross Wilson and talking about what he may do and how he's going to approach everything with the academy and with the first team. And it seems like Sean Neve is a very well thought about player. And he's banging in the goals. And that's all he can do. As an academy striker, all Sean Neve can do is keep scoring goals left, right and centre. And he will be fine. He will be perfectly fine. He has got potential. Parker's also got potential. He had a rough start in the academy when his first team in the preseason was excellent. But he struggled a little bit in the early days of the academy. However, he's now starting to, show what he can do as well. So there is some exciting players in the academy. Don't get me wrong here. We have got some good players. But it's been a while since we've seen those players come through. Lewis Miley is one of them. But listen, there's going to be opportunities because I think we've not mentioned we've not mentioned Joe Willock in this conversation at all. And for me, Joe Willock is one of the players that I think we have to let go in January. He is taking up a space in the squad, and there's nothing telling me that he's going to make a difference anymore. And I think a lot of fans would agree with that we just haven't seen enough from Joe Willock, and the fact that, he's injury prone, etc., etc. I think Joe Willock is not being talked about enough for a January move for me. He's not even in the discussions with all these reports that are coming out saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Joe Willock I think Joe Willock needs to go before Osula, if I'm openly honest with you. I would rather see Willock go first. I think Joe Willock has performed really poorly for a long time now. Forget about the injuries, just his performances have not been good enough. And I would rather see Joe Willock go before Will Osula. And when I say that I don't think Will Osula, at the moment, I'm not convinced by Osula, but I'm more convinced about him than I am Joe Willock. Because Joe Willock's been around a lot longer and doesn't do anything when he comes on the pitch. He hasn't made a difference. I think there was a little bit of a message there in Eddie Howe's comments about him the other week when he mentioned Joe Willock, saying that, if you're going to come in, you need to perform, you need to make sure that you stay in the team. And then when you're not in the team, you need to work harder to get back in the team. And I think, that was on the back of a Joe Willock conversation. So I think that was a message from Eddie that Willock needs to pull his finger out. But again, just like potential, how long are we going to keep saying about Willock? Saying, he's good enough. He needs to get his form back. But how long are we going to say that? He's been out of form for so long. And it's not working for Joe Willock. Klobeck says, agree, Willock's value can only decrease now. Osula has admirers and might for another season. Darren says, was a rumour Willock had a fallout with Howe, which got heated between the pair 3 weeks ago. I heard about that. Listen, unless it's confirmed by anybody official, then we can't really talk about things like that. If it did happen, it did happen. But however, I do think, we see it day in, day out with football. That there is clashes between players and managers or players and players, etc. It's how you respond to that, though. It's how you sort it out. If Willock goes in a sulk, then, he's not going to get anywhere with Eddie Howe, let's be honest. If he's in a sulk about something, then he's not going to get any time on the pitch. And I think that's been identified by the fact that the last few games, he hasn't made any appearances as substitute either. Eddie hasn't even brought him on. It's been Miley, etc. before anything. So I think Willock is bang out of favour right now. And I agree with Kenzie there. I'm not sure why Willock's still at this football club. I think we should have sold him in the summer. There is better midfielders out there. We've now got Jacob Ramsey in the squad. We've now got, Lewis Miley playing very, very well as well. There is no place for Joe Willock. He is miles behind everybody else now. And it's not like, anybody would be excited if Joe Willock, came on, because he's had chances. He's started games. He's come on as sub. He's made no impact in any game at all. And the last time Joe Willock made an impact in a game for me was Birmingham. And, Birmingham were in League One at the time. So what does that say? That's the last time I saw probably Joe Willock make an impact in the game was at St Andrews. I can't remember anything else after that I've sort of sat up and gone, wow, that was a great performance from Joe Willock. He's been disappointing, to say the least. And for me, there is other clubs out there that may be better suited for Joe Willock. There was rumours about Crystal Palace in the summer. There was rumours about Fulham. Obviously, both involve him moving back to London. That may be the way forward for Joe Willock. And I just hope that maybe Ross Wilson is looking at that. Maybe he's having conversations with Eddie Howe already about certain players not making the grade. Willock has done a great job for us. I'm not denying that. When he first came, he single-handedly grabbed the team by the scruff of the neck under Steve Bruce and did really, really well. But now, he hasn't followed it through. He hasn't become that player that we can turn to make a difference. And it's sad in a way, because Joe Willock is, like I said, did so well when he first came, but he's fell so far off the cliff. Here we go. Turpy says 3 minutes behind, but I really can't wait for you to take back all the shite you chat about Osula, Paul. I reckon Eddie rates him. He will prove all you lot doubting him wrong. For a third choice ain't much better. Turpy, I'm not slagging him off. It's my opinion, mate. If I want to come out and say that I don't think Will Osula's going to make the grade, I'll say it. But also, what I have said many, many times when I've said that, I've also followed it up with, I hope he proves me wrong. And I've said that numerous times. You can go back and watch all the videos and all the shows. I have said that I hope Will Osula throws egg in my face and proves me wrong. Many times I've said that. So that is my opinion. But then again, if Eddie Howe rates him, like Chipper says there, why does he not play him more? He's having to play him now. He's having to play him now because Wiss is injured. And why was the deal set up to let him go in the summer? You have to ask those questions. You have to ask why. Yes, PIF stopped the deal at the last minute. Not Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe didn't stop the deal going through. It was PIF. So there's a reason. But I'm not chatting shite about Osula. I want Osula to succeed. But in my opinion, I'm not convinced by him. And many fans aren't convinced by him. I don't think he's Premier League standard, but I damn well hope he becomes Premier League standard. I hope he becomes an absolute superstar. It's not chatting shite. It's opinions, Turpy. You need to get that into your head, mate. We all said it about J7, and thankfully he proved us wrong. Absolutely, Niall. Listen, if there's one man, right, that some players can look to have a sort of resurrection, then look at J7. Look at Joe Linton's performances. Look at where he was in his early days at the club to where he is now and what he has thought about at this football club. I slated the guy, along with many, many thousands of Newcastle United fans, thought that £40 million for this guy was a joke. However, he is now one of my favourite players at Newcastle United. And they can. It's proved that they can turn a corner, they can improve, they can get better, they can resurrect their careers. And there's no reason why Osula can't do that. However, I do think Wilson is going to look at Willock and think that's not possible. But it's maybe with Osula. But all I'm going on about Osula is what I'm seeing in the press. Fuba says, Paul, I think you're trying to say that you are talking from your head and not your heart regarding Osula. Exactly. But you can't make everybody happy with your opinions. That's quite clear since I've done this job. It is very clear that people don't understand what opinions are. Richard Grant says Willock is 26. He should be flying now, shouldn't he? He should be at the pinnacle of his career. You know, when he came to Newcastle United, Willock looked like an absolute superstar. An absolute superstar. You know, you look at the goals he scored, and it was brilliant to watch. And you thought, wow, get this guy signed. Get him signed, and he could be part of this midfield for a long time to come. He could be one of those superstars that we look and think, wow, look where he came from. But I'm sorry, at 26, he should be absolutely at the foremost of Eddie's thoughts, thinking, right, how do I get Joe Willock into the side? But Eddie's not thinking like that, because that's been proved over the last few games where he's been on the bench and he just hasn't used him. And that, for me, tells a big, big story. Venomiga says he is at the pinnacle. He's shite. Well, if shite's his pinnacle, then we need to move him on. It's as simple as that. We have to look at another club for Joe Willock. I don't know. I don't know who buys Joe Willock at the minute. Because I don't know what other clubs see in him, if I'm honest. Surely other clubs have looked at him lately and thought, wow, he's a shadow of himself. But somebody else may be able to get better out of Joe Willock. We'll see in time. Liam says, Paul, I know you'll disagree, but in my opinion, I want to see more from Elanga. He doesn't defend. I'm not in the Miggy 2.0 camp, but he needs to step up more. I do agree with you, Liam. Funny enough, I do think he needs to step up more, but I think he will. I think it's too early at the moment to make any assumptions on Anthony Elanga. We're too early in the season. You know, the players we're talking about in this show have been here for a good while now, but Elanga's only been here for a few games. We can't, he hasn't had the greatest of starts, but I've seen enough to think that, there is a really good player in there. And hopefully, working alongside Eddie, getting better, Eddie sort of helping him with his defending as well, that might all come good. It might not, but I can't make a judgment on Elanga on a few games. But a lot of people who talk about Elanga, love this kid and think he's a really good player. And hopefully, as time goes on, we get to see that more and more. But I think it's far too early to make a decision on Elanga. But there is the problem is there's a lot of fans out there who will make decisions based on a couple of games. And, players read all this, etc., and they get into a bit of a rut with it. Now, I hope that doesn't happen with Elanga, because I think we've got a lot to offer Anthony Elanga as a club, and he's got a lot to offer us as a player. So let's give him an opportunity. Let's see him after a run of games, maybe by Christmas. Let's look at it Christmas, January time, after the busy Christmas period's over. Obviously, the rotation in the squad. Let's see where we are. Let's see where we are in the league, in the cups, and as individual players. I'm sure, that there will be a lot to talk about then. But I do believe that I've seen enough in Elanga to convince me that he does have a good future at this football club. But that might change. If he continues down the road he's on now, then I don't think I'll be too impressed by Christmas. In all honesty, I don't think anybody will. But if he starts getting assists and he starts scoring goals, and maybe helping defensively, I understand that. But listen, I'm sure Eddie knows all this. I'm pretty damn sure he will. And he'll be working with Elanga on a daily basis once the international crap is out the way. I know we've got another one in November. It's an absolute fucking joke. Just when the Premier League gets going again, it stops. Something's got to be done about these international breaks, because it does affect the league. And anybody that says it doesn't is just blind. Because, teams need a bit of momentum, and teams that are getting momentum going, and then suddenly there's a 2-week break again. It's a pain in the arse, and then that momentum is taken away, and you've got to go again. And then the problem is, by the time players come back from all over the world for international duty, 2 days later they're thrust back into the Premier League again. It's a joke. I mean, you look at Bruno and Joe Linton at the minute. We're in South Korea, right? They've got to travel back, and then we're away at Brighton on Saturday at 3 o'clock kickoff. Something has to be done about the international breaks. International football needs to happen. Absolutely, it does. But you look back to, when I was a kid watching England, they used to, play the league. Then they went away with England, played on a Wednesday night, and then they were back in the league the week after. There was no break. And if you're looking for momentum as a Premier League side, you're not going to get it in the early months of the season because, you know, September, October, November, there's international breaks. It's crazy. So we need to see much better. Listen, Dan, I agree with that. You know, what is the better option? The NHL shuts down for the Olympics. Yes, they do, and that'll be happening when the Winter Olympics are on this year. But look, why not? Listen, this may sound mental, right? But I'm just trying to put out there, maybe shut the league down for a month, right? And get all these qualifiers done within that month. You know? Just get them done and out the way. But to stop it every month for 2 weeks, momentum is shattered. You can't get any momentum in the early part of the season because you're not allowed. You can't. Anyway, it's madness. But there you go, guys. That is the breakfast show done and done. Thank you once again for tuning in. Great conversation as usual this morning. I'm back tonight. There will be a fan forum tonight, folks, in the build-up to the Brighton game. We'll get a fan forum fit in because England play tomorrow, of course, and then we start building up for the Brighton game on Saturday. So your opportunity to come and join me live on the show and have your say on Newcastle United. We'll talk about the contract situation. We'll talk about Ross Wilson. We'll talk about Osula. We'll talk about everything and where we go moving forward after this international break and, of course, the next one. But thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it, guys. And we'll see you again at 7. I will do another video if there is news to bring you later on in the day. But until tonight, I bid you goodbye.
Come back and check on Breathe.